The strangest thing about loneliness is that it can sit at a table for two and still have no one across from it. On a cold Thursday evening in Manhattan, the city glowed with 1,000 reflections. Yellow taxi lights shimmered across rain-soaked streets. Steam drifted from subway grates. People hurried beneath umbrellas, chasing dinners, meetings, and lives that seemed too full to slow down. Yet only a few blocks away, a man stood alone beneath the soft gold sign of Blackwell Steakhouse. His coat was worn. His shoes were scuffed. His gray knit cap hid most of his hair. To anyone passing by, he looked like another homeless man searching for shelter from the weather. No one recognized Ethan Blackwell. No one recognized the billionaire who owned more than 100 restaurants across America. Ethan stood still for a moment, staring through the front window. Inside, crystal lights glowed warmly above polished wood tables. Couples laughed over wine. Business partners exchanged handshakes. Families celebrated birthdays. It looked perfect. It always looked perfect. That was the problem. For years, Ethan had watched reports, spreadsheets, and customer surveys. Numbers told him profits were growing. Reviews told him guests were happy. But numbers never told him whether kindness still lived inside the walls of the company he had built. Tonight, however, he was not here as a CEO. He was here as a stranger, a forgotten man, a person nobody would impress. Taking a slow breath, he pushed open the door. Warm air rushed toward him. The smell of grilled steak and fresh bread filled the room. Conversations continued for a second before several heads turned. Then something changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A wrinkle of discomfort, a sideways glance, a quick look away. The hostess forced a smile that never reached her eyes. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked carefully. Ethan noticed the hesitation, the uncertainty, the silent question behind her words. "Do you belong here?" Before he could answer, another customer stepped forward, brushing past him without apology. A businessman in an expensive navy suit frowned, as though Ethan's presence had interrupted the evening itself. Ethan said nothing. He simply waited. Around him, the restaurant buzzed with life. Yet somehow he already felt invisible. Then, from across the dining room, a young waitress carrying a tray paused. Her name tag read Emily Carter. She noticed the man standing alone by the entrance. She noticed the uncomfortable silence. Most importantly, she noticed something no one else seemed to see. Not a homeless man. Not a problem. Not an inconvenience. Just a person. Their eyes met for only a second. Emily offered a small smile. Quiet. Genuine. The kind of smile that expected nothing in return. And for the first time that evening, Ethan felt something he had not expected to find inside his own restaurant. Hope. Emily Carter had learned long ago that people revealed who they truly were when they thought no one important was watching. The lesson had arrived slowly through years of double shifts, unpaid bills, and customers who treated servers as if they were part of the furniture. At 24, she could read a dining room the way some people read a book. She could spot a first date from 50 feet away. She could tell when a business deal was going badly before the appetizers arrived. She could even recognize the difference between a customer who was angry and one who was simply lonely. As she stood near the service station, balancing a tray of sparkling water and coffee cups, her eyes drifted back toward the entrance. The older man in the worn coat was still standing there, waiting. No one had invited him farther inside. No one had offered him a seat. Around him, conversations continued. Forks clinked against plates. Glasses caught the warm glow of chandelier light. Yet somehow the space around him felt unusually empty. Emily noticed the hostess glance nervously toward the floor manager. The floor manager glanced toward a group of wealthy regulars seated near the front windows. Everyone seemed worried about the same thing. Not whether the man needed help, whether he might make other guests uncomfortable. Emily felt a familiar ache in her chest. Her father used to say that dignity cost nothing, which was fortunate because sometimes it was all a person had left. She handed off her tray and walked toward the entrance before anyone could stop her. "Good evening, sir," she said softly. "Are you dining alone tonight?" Ethan looked at her for a moment. Most people avoided eye contact. Emily did not. Her expression carried neither pity nor suspicion, only simple courtesy. "Yes," he answered. "Just me." Emily nodded. "Then let us find you a good seat." The floor manager immediately appeared beside her. His smile looked practiced, tight, uncomfortable. "Emily, we are fully booked." She glanced across the dining room. "Table 14 is still open." That table is reserved. For 8 o'clock, she replied calmly. It is only 6:30. The manager hesitated. Emily rarely argued. When she did, she usually had a reason. I can move him when the reservation arrives, she added. Ethan watched the exchange quietly. He had seen thousands of employees during his career. Some followed rules. Some followed pressure. Very few followed principles. Emily turned back toward him. Please come with me. As she led him through the restaurant, several customers stared openly. One woman lowered her voice and whispered something to her husband. A young man in a tailored suit frowned into his wine glass. Emily ignored all of it. She guided Ethan to a small table beside the front window where rain traced silver lines across the glass. It was not the largest table, not the most expensive, but it offered a view of the city lights beyond the street. There, she said, placing a menu in front of him. I always think this is the best seat in the house. For the first time that evening, Ethan found himself believing her. Ethan waited until Emily disappeared toward the kitchen before opening the menu. He was not reading the items. He already knew every dish, every ingredient, every price. Years ago, he had approved most of them himself. Instead, he watched. That was why he had come. Not to inspect spreadsheets. Not to review reports. To watch people when they believed they were ordinary moments. Across the dining room, a server hurried past carrying a tray of steaks. Near the bar, two managers spoke in low voices while occasionally glancing toward Ethan's table. One of them shook his head. The other forced a laugh. Ethan recognized the look immediately. Concern for appearances. Concern for image. Concern for anything except the person sitting in front of them. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window beside him. The city lights blurred into gold and silver streaks. For a moment, he found himself staring at his reflection in the glass. The worn coat. The tired face. The gray cap pulled low. Strange, he thought. He had spent years building a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet tonight, he looked more honest than he had in years. A coffee cup appeared beside him. He looked up. Emily stood there holding a small pot. This evening feels like coffee weather, she said. Would you like some? Ethan glanced at the menu. I did not order coffee. I know. She smiled gently. The first cup is on me. Ethan watched as she filled the mug. Steam curled upward between them. Thank you, he said. You are welcome. Emily started to leave, but paused. And if you need a few extra minutes with the menu, there is no rush. No rush. Such simple words. Yet Ethan could not remember the last time anyone had spoken them to him. His entire life operated on schedules, deadlines, and expectations. Every minute measured. Every decision evaluated. No rush felt almost foreign. Emily returned to her other tables. Ethan took a sip of coffee. It was hot. Fresh. Exactly right. Across the room, he noticed a young couple sharing a dessert. Nearby, an older man sat alone reading a newspaper while slowly eating soup. The restaurant felt alive. Human. Imperfect. Then his attention shifted toward Emily again. She moved quickly but never appeared frantic. She remembered names. Refills. Small details. One elderly customer smiled as she adjusted his napkin. Another thanked her for remembering his usual order. She treated each person as if they mattered. Ethan found himself wondering how many people noticed that. Probably very few. Excellence often arrived quietly. A loud mistake captured attention. Quiet kindness rarely did. As Emily passed by again, Ethan noticed something else. She looked tired. Not physically exhausted. Alone. There was something deeper behind her eyes. A weight she carried carefully. Yet she continued smiling. Continued helping. Continued noticing people others overlooked. Ethan wrapped both hands around the warm coffee cup and looked toward the rain-covered window. For the first time in a very long time, he was no longer studying a restaurant. He was studying a person. And something told him Emily Carter had a story no customer had ever taken the time to hear. The dinner rush intensified as the evening moved forward. Every table seemed occupied. Every conversation blended into a steady hum beneath the soft music floating through the restaurant. Yet despite the growing crowd, Ethan noticed something unexpected. The farther the night progressed, the more isolated certain people appeared. A businessman sat alone near the bar, pretending to read emails while repeatedly glancing at families enjoying dinner together. An elderly woman slowly stirred her tea without touching the dessert in front of her. A young man stared through the window, as if waiting for someone who had already decided not to come. Loneliness, Ethan realized, wore many different suits. Emily passed his table carrying a tray balanced effortlessly on one hand. She paused when she noticed his untouched menu. Still deciding? She asked. Ethan looked up. Maybe. The pot roast is good on rainy nights. That sounds oddly specific. A faint smile appeared on her face. Some meals belong to certain weather. Ethan found himself smiling back. Then I trust your recommendation. One pot roast coming right up. As she walked away, Ethan watched several customers call for her attention at once. Somehow she managed each request without making anyone feel ignored. It was a rare skill. Most people heard words. Emily seemed to hear people. 20 minutes later, she returned carrying a steaming plate. The scent of roasted vegetables and slow-cooked beef filled the air between them. Careful, she said. The plate is hot. Ethan looked at the meal. It was prepared exactly as he remembered from the original recipe created years ago. He took a bite. For a moment, memories surfaced unexpectedly. His mother, standing in a small kitchen. Winter evenings. A narrow apartment before success arrived. Before private jets. Before boardrooms. Before his name appeared on magazine covers. Back when dinner was not about status. It was simply about being together. You look surprised, Emily said. Ethan lowered his fork. It tastes familiar. That is usually a good sign. She started to leave before turning back. Can I ask you something? Ethan nodded. Do you always eat alone? The question caught him off guard. Not because it was rude, because it was honest. He glanced toward the rain outside. Most of the time. Emily studied him for a second. That must get tiring. Ethan almost laughed. Most people assumed wealth protected a person from loneliness. They imagined success filled every empty space. Few understood that large houses often echoed louder than small ones. Sometimes, he admitted. Emily nodded as though she understood more than he expected. My grandmother used to say that eating alone once feels peaceful. Eating alone every day feels different. Ethan looked at her carefully. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass. Rain continued tracing quiet paths down the window. Then a voice suddenly cut through the calm. Emily. The floor manager stood several feet away. His expression was tight again. Impatient. Watching her spend time at Ethan's table. Emily straightened immediately. I should get back to work. Ethan nodded. But as she walked away, he noticed something in the manager's eyes. Disapproval. Not because she had done something wrong. Because she had chosen kindness where others would have chosen convenience. And somehow, Ethan had the feeling the evening was only beginning. Emily spent the next hour moving through the dining room like a steady light in a storm. Orders arrived. Glasses emptied and refilled. New guests entered from the rain, while others finished their meals and disappeared into the Manhattan night. Through it all, Ethan remained at the small table by the window, quietly observing. The more he watched, the more a pattern emerged. Most customers barely noticed. Emily. They appreciated the service, but rarely saw the person providing it. Yet she remembered birthdays, asked about recovering surgeries, knew which regular preferred lemon in his water and which one hated it. Small details, invisible details, the kind that never appeared in quarterly reports. Near 8 o'clock, the reserved party finally arrived. For sharply dressed executives entered laughing loudly as the hostess guided them toward the dining room. Ethan immediately recognized one of them, Daniel Mercer, a real estate developer who occasionally attended charity events with him. Daniel glanced toward Ethan's table and visibly frowned. He leaned toward the hostess and whispered something. The hostess forced an uncomfortable smile. Seconds later, the floor manager approached Ethan again. Sir, he said carefully, we may need this table. Ethan looked around. Several smaller tables remained available. I thought the reservation was for 8 o'clock. It is. And it is 8 o'clock. The manager shifted awkwardly. The guest specifically requested the window section. Ethan knew exactly what was happening. The table was not the issue. Appearances were. Before he could respond, Emily appeared beside them. Table 22 just opened, she said calmly. It also has a window view. The manager turned toward her. That table seats 6. Then it should fit 4 comfortably. For a second, nobody spoke. The manager clearly wanted to argue. Instead, he forced another smile. Fine. He walked away. Ethan noticed several nearby customers watching the exchange. Some looked relieved. Others looked embarrassed. Emily simply adjusted a water glass on his table. Sorry about that. Why are you apologizing? Ethan asked. Because everyone deserves a peaceful meal. Ethan studied her face. Even people nobody wants sitting nearby? Emily looked genuinely puzzled. Especially those people. The answer arrived so naturally that Ethan almost forgot she had said it. No speech. No performance. Just conviction. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a small dessert plate. Warm apple pie. A scoop of vanilla ice cream slowly melting on top. Ethan glanced up. I did not order this. I know. Emily placed it carefully in front of him. The kitchen made an extra slice. Ethan suspected that was not entirely true. And if I cannot pay for it? Emily smiled. Then enjoy it anyway. She walked away before he could answer. Ethan stared at the dessert. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers. Yet for the first time in years, the loneliness he carried felt slightly lighter. Not because someone had recognized him. Not because someone admired his success. Because one person had offered kindness without knowing who he was. And somehow, Ethan had a feeling that was worth more than anything he had built. By 9 o'clock, the crowd had begun to thin. The loudest conversations faded. Empty tables slowly appeared across the dining room. Outside, the rain softened into a gentle mist that blurred the city into a watercolor of lights and shadows. Ethan remained by the window, nursing the last of his coffee. For once, he was in no hurry to leave. Emily passed by carrying a stack of menus and paused when she noticed his nearly empty cup. Would you like a refill? She asked. Ethan glanced at his watch out of habit before realizing there was nowhere he needed to be. Why not? Emily poured fresh coffee and smiled. That is usually the correct answer. Ethan chuckled quietly. It surprised him. Laughter had become rare lately. Not because life was difficult. Because it had become predictable. Every meeting felt familiar. Every conversation seemed to revolve around profits, acquisitions, and expansion plans. Nobody asked how he was. They asked what he was building next. Emily set the coffee pot aside. Can I ask you something? Ethan nodded. You have been sitting here for almost 3 hours. Is that a problem? Not at all. She folded her hands lightly. I'm just wondering if you are waiting for someone. The question lingered between them. Ethan looked toward the empty chair across from him. No, Emily followed his gaze. Then maybe you were. Ethan did not answer immediately. Somewhere behind the bar, glasses clinked softly. A dishwasher hummed in the distance. The restaurant suddenly felt quieter than before. Maybe, he admitted. Emily nodded as though she understood. My grandmother used to leave an extra chair at every holiday dinner. Ethan looked up. Why? She said every family has someone they miss. Her voice remained calm, gentle. The chair reminded us that love does not disappear just because a person is gone. Ethan stared into his coffee. The steam drifted upward in slow spirals. For a moment, he saw his mother again. Her smile. Her laugh. The way she used to call every Sunday, no matter how busy he was. It had been 11 months since she passed away. 11 months of flowers, condolences, and polite sympathy. Yet somehow a simple conversation with a waitress hurt more and healed more than any of it. Your grandmother sounds remarkable, he said quietly. She was. Emily glanced toward the kitchen. She also believed lonely people deserve company. Ethan smiled faintly. And do you believe that? I think everyone deserves to feel seen. Before Ethan could respond, a voice interrupted them. The floor manager approached again, his expression sharper this time. Emily, we need you in the back. The warmth immediately faded from her face. Not fear. Resignation. The expression of someone who already knew what was coming. I will be right there, she replied. The manager looked at Ethan's table, then back at Emily. Now. Emily offered Ethan an apologetic smile before walking away. Ethan watched her disappear through the kitchen doors. Then he noticed something else. Several employees had also seen the interaction. They quickly looked away, as though this conversation had happened before, as though kindness carried a cost inside these walls. Ethan slowly set down his coffee cup. For the first time that evening, concern replaced curiosity. Because whatever was waiting for Emily behind those doors, he had a feeling it was not about coffee, tables, or schedules. It was about the choice she had made when everyone else looked the other way. The kitchen hallway was quieter than the dining room, but the tension felt heavier. Emily stood near a stainless steel prep counter while the floor manager folded his arms across his chest. Around them, cooks continued working, pretending not to listen. You spent far too much time at that table tonight, he said. Emily remained calm. I completed every assignment. That is not the point. He lowered his voice. Customers notice things. We have an image to maintain. Emily already knew where the conversation was heading. You mean the gentleman by the window? The manager sighed. Emily, people come here expecting a certain atmosphere. And what atmosphere is that? She asked quietly. He hesitated. You know exactly what I mean. Emily looked toward the dining room doors. Through the small glass panel, she could see Ethan sitting alone beneath the warm chandelier light. No, she replied. I do not. The manager rubbed his forehead. Look, I am trying to help you. Some guests complained. Because he was eating dinner? Because he looked out of place. For a moment, nobody spoke. Even the kitchen noises seemed farther away. Then Emily asked a simple question. Did he bother anyone? No. Was he rude? No. Did he refuse to pay? We do not know that. Emily nodded slowly. So the problem is how he looks. The manager's expression hardened. The problem is perception. Emily had heard that word many times before. Perception. It often meant judging someone before learning their story. I disagree, she said. Of course you do. The manager shook his head. You always do. Emily almost smiled at that. Perhaps he was right. She did disagree often when kindness became optional. My shift ends in an hour, she said. I will finish my tables. The manager stared at her for a long moment before walking away. Just remember where you work. Emily watched him disappear into the office. Then she released a slow breath she had been holding. One of the line cooks approached quietly. You okay? He asked. I am fine. You know he is upset because the customer stayed. Emily nodded. I know. The cook glanced toward the dining room. Most people would have ignored him. Emily picked up a tray. That does not make it right. A few minutes later, she returned to the floor carrying fresh glasses. The restaurant felt different now. Smaller somehow. More fragile. She realized that. Kindness often revealed things people preferred to hide. As she passed Ethan's table, she noticed him staring out at the city lights. Alone. Silent. The empty chair across from him remained untouched. Something about that image stayed with her. Not the worn coat. Not the disguise she knew nothing about. The chair. Empty chairs told stories. And for reasons she could not explain, Emily had the feeling that whatever story this man carried had been weighing on him for a very long time. 10 o'clock arrived quietly. Most of the dinner crowd had gone home. The restaurant that once buzzed with conversation now echoed with softer sounds. Chairs shifted. Receipts printed. Servers wiped tables beneath pools of warm light. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets shining like polished glass. Ethan remained at the window. The city moved beyond him, but he felt strangely detached from it. For years he had been surrounded by people. Assistants, executives, investors, reporters. Yet very few had ever noticed when he was tired. Fewer still had noticed when he was hurting. Across the room, Emily finished settling a check for an elderly couple. The husband walked with a cane. The wife moved slowly beside him. Before they left, the woman reached for Emily's hand and squeezed it gently. Ethan could not hear the words that followed. He did not need to. The gratitude was visible. Real gratitude always was. Emily watched them leave and smiled to herself. Then she glanced toward Ethan's table. Their eyes met again. This time she walked over carrying nothing. No menus. No coffee pot. No order pad. Just herself. How was the pie? She asked. Excellent. Good. I was hoping it would be. Ethan tilted his head slightly. You were hoping? Emily laughed softly. I may have encouraged the kitchen to make that extra slice. Ethan pretended to look shocked. So there was no mysterious surplus dessert? Not tonight. For a moment they both smiled. The conversation felt easy. Unexpectedly easy. Can I tell you something? Emily asked. Of course. She looked toward the empty chair across from him. When you first walked in, I thought you looked sad. Ethan blinked. Nobody had said that to him in years. People often described him as successful, driven, powerful, intelligent. Sad was never one of the words. That obvious? He asked. Only if you know what it looks like. Her answer caught his attention. And you do? Emily nodded slowly. After my grandmother passed away, I spent months pretending I was fine. Her smile faded slightly. Most people believed me. Ethan remained silent. The strange thing about grief, she continued, is that the world keeps moving. Everyone goes back to normal. But for you, normal disappeared. The words landed gently. Yet somehow they struck deeper than any speech he had heard at memorial services or charity galas. Ethan stared at the table. That is true. Emily did not rush to fill the silence. She simply waited. It was a rare gift. Most people listened in order to respond. Emily listened in order to understand. Finally, Ethan spoke. I lost someone important last year. Emily nodded. No surprise. No curiosity. Just understanding. I am sorry. The restaurant seemed unusually quiet. Somewhere near the bar, a clock ticked softly. Outside, headlights drifted past the window. Thank you, Ethan said. Emily offered a small smile. Sometimes people do not need advice. What do they need? Ethan asked. Just one person willing to stay at the table. As she spoke those words, neither of them noticed the floor manager watching from across the room. But the expression on his face suggested that before the night ended, something was about to change. The moment Emily walked away, Ethan remained seated in silence. Her words lingered long after the conversation ended. Just one person willing to stay at the table. Such a simple idea. Yet it felt more valuable than most of the advice he had received during the past year. Around him, employees continued preparing for closing time. Chairs were stacked in distant sections. The hostess organized reservation books. Glasses disappeared into trays bound for the kitchen. The evening was winding down. Then Ethan noticed something unusual. Emily had not returned to the floor. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Concern tugged at him. Not because he expected her attention, because kindness like hers was rarely appreciated in places obsessed with appearances. Across the room, the floor manager emerged from the office carrying a clipboard. His expression looked satisfied. Ethan watched him speak briefly with another supervisor before both glanced toward the kitchen. Something was wrong. A few moments later, Emily finally returned. She moved through the dining room with the same professional composure as before, but Ethan immediately noticed the difference. Her smile no longer reached her eyes. It was subtle. Most people would have missed it. Ethan did not. Years of negotiating billion-dollar deals had taught him to read what people tried to hide. Emily approached his table carrying the check folder. I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed before we close, she said. Her voice remained warm, professional, yet there was a heaviness beneath it. Ethan looked at the folder but did not open it. Are you all right? Emily seemed surprised by the question. Of course. Ethan waited. Emily looked away first. Long day, she said softly. That is all. Ethan knew it was not all. But he also understood something equally important. People shared their burdens when they were ready, not when they were asked. He nodded. I understand. Emily placed the folder on the table and started to leave. Then she paused. Can I tell you a secret? Ethan smiled faintly. I think that depends on the secret. A small laugh escaped her. The first genuine one in nearly half an hour. When I was younger, I thought success meant having enough money that nothing could hurt anymore. Ethan looked up. And now? Emily folded her hands behind her back. Now I think success is having people who stay when life becomes difficult. The words settled quietly between them. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Because despite everything he owned, despite every accomplishment attached to his name, he could not honestly say he had many of those people left. Emily smiled one last time. Good night. Then she turned and walked away. Ethan watched her disappear toward the employee hallway. Outside, the clouds finally parted. A few stars appeared above the city skyline. Inside, he slowly opened the check folder. His eyes moved to the receipt. Then they stopped. There was no charge for the coffee, no charge for the pie. And beside the total, written in neat handwriting, was a short note. Sometimes people need kindness more than they need a bill. For the first time that night, Ethan felt his eyes sting slightly. Not because of the money, because someone had seen his loneliness and answered it with compassion. The restaurant officially closed 30 minutes later. One by one, the remaining customers disappeared into the cool Manhattan night. The front doors locked. The chandeliers dimmed slightly. The atmosphere changed from hospitality to routine. Employees counted receipts. Kitchen staff finished cleaning stations. Another day was ending. Ethan remained seated a little longer, holding the check folder in his hands. He read the note again. Sometimes people need kindness more than they need a bill. The words were simple, yet they revealed more about Emily's character than any resume ever could. Most businesses rewarded efficiency. Few rewarded humanity. Ethan finally stood and reached into his coat. From an inner pocket, he removed several folded bills. enough to cover the meal many times over. He placed them inside the folder, then quietly walked toward the exit. Just before reaching the door, voices drifted from the hallway near the manager's office. He recognized one of them immediately. Emily. Ethan slowed his steps. Not out of curiosity, out of concern. I understand the policy, Emily was saying calmly. Then you understand why this is a problem, the floor manager replied. His voice carried the sharp edge Ethan had heard earlier. You gave away food. You removed charges without approval. It was coffee and dessert. That is not the point. Ethan remained still, hidden from view, listening. You cannot decide which guests deserve special treatment. Emily answered quietly. I did not give special treatment. Then what do you call it? There was a brief silence. When Emily spoke again, her voice was softer than before. Basic kindness. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Basic kindness. Somewhere along the way, many people had started treating it as a luxury. This is a business, the manager said firmly. Not a charity. I know. Then stop acting like every customer is your personal responsibility. Ethan heard papers shifting, a chair scraping lightly against the floor. I am giving you a formal warning. Another silence followed. Longer this time. Understood, Emily replied. No anger. No argument. Just quiet acceptance. The conversation ended. Footsteps approached the hallway entrance. Ethan quickly stepped outside before he could be seen. The cool air greeted him. The rain had ended completely now. Across the street, city lights reflected off wet pavement like scattered gold. Ethan stood beneath the restaurant sign and looked back through the front window. A few employees remained inside. Among them was Emily. She emerged from the hallway carrying a stack of menus. Her posture remained straight, professional. Yet Ethan noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. Not physical exhaustion, the deeper kind. The exhaustion that comes from caring in a world that often rewards indifference. For a long moment, he simply watched. Then something unexpected happened. Emily glanced toward the front window, toward the empty street, toward the place where Ethan stood hidden in the shadows. For a second, their eyes nearly met through the glass. Ethan stepped back instinctively. Emily looked away and continued working. She had no idea who he really was. No idea that the man she had defended all evening owned every chair, every table, every light fixture in the building. And somehow that made her actions even more meaningful. Because she had expected nothing in return. Ethan slipped his hands into his coat pockets and began walking slowly down the sidewalk. Tomorrow morning, everything would change. But tonight he carried only one thought with him. Emily Carter had passed a test she never knew existed. The next morning arrived bright and clear. Sunlight poured between the skyscrapers of Manhattan, washing away every trace of the previous night's rain. By 8 o'clock, Blackwell Steakhouse was already preparing for another day. Coffee brewed. Silverware clinked softly against polished countertops. Employees moved through their routines, unaware that this morning would be remembered for years. Emily arrived 10 minutes early as she always did. She tied her apron, greeted the kitchen staff, and began setting up her section. Nothing felt different. Yet as she stepped onto the dining floor, she immediately sensed an unusual tension in the air. The floor manager stood near the entrance, checking his watch every few seconds. Two regional supervisors she had never seen before were speaking quietly near the hostess station. Even the staff seemed unusually careful. What is going on? Emily asked one of the servers. The woman shrugged. Corporate visit. Emily nodded. Corporate visits happened occasionally. Usually they involved inspections, reports, and nervous managers pretending everything was perfect. She thought little of it and continued preparing tables. At precisely 9 o'clock, a black sedan stopped outside the restaurant. Then another, and another. Employees instinctively straightened their posture. The floor manager hurried toward the entrance. Through the front windows, several executives stepped onto the sidewalk wearing tailored suits and carrying leather portfolios. Emily recognized none of them, but she recognized the reaction they created. Respect, anxiety, expectation. Moments later, the front doors opened. The executives entered first. Then someone else followed behind them. Emily froze. Her hands stopped moving. The room seemed to fall strangely quiet. The man walking through the entrance wore a charcoal suit perfectly tailored to his frame. His silver watch caught the morning light. His posture was calm, confident, familiar. For one impossible second, Emily thought she was mistaken. Then he looked up. Ethan. The same eyes. The same voice. The same man who had sat alone by the window. The same man who had shared coffee and memories beneath the rain. Around her, employees immediately straightened. Several greeted him by name. Others looked almost intimidated. The floor manager hurried forward with an eager smile. "Mr. Blackwell, welcome." Emily felt her breath catch. Blackwell. The name echoed through her mind. Ethan Blackwell, founder, owner, chief executive officer, the man who owned the entire company. Suddenly, every conversation from the previous evening replayed in her head. Every cup of coffee, every question, every moment. Ethan's gaze moved across the restaurant until it found hers. Unlike everyone else, he did not look away. A small smile appeared on his face. Quiet, genuine. Exactly the same smile she had seen the night before. Around them, confusion spread among the staff. The floor manager looked from Ethan to Emily and back again. Something was clearly wrong with the picture he thought he understood. Ethan took a few slow steps forward. The restaurant remained silent. Then he spoke. "Good morning, everyone." His voice was calm, measured, yet somehow every person in the room listened. "Before we begin today's meeting, there is someone I would like to thank." And as dozens of eyes turned toward her, Emily suddenly realized that the longest day of her life had just begun. The silence inside the restaurant seemed to stretch forever. Emily stood frozen beside the service station while every eye in the room turned toward her. She wanted to disappear, not because she had done anything wrong, because she had never enjoyed being the center of attention. Ethan remained calm. The executives beside him waited quietly. Even the floor manager looked uncertain now. "Last night," Ethan continued, "I visited this restaurant without introducing myself." A murmur moved through the room. Employees exchanged confused glances. The floor manager's face slowly lost color. Ethan spoke with the same steady tone he had used over coffee. "I came here dressed in a way that guaranteed people would make assumptions about me." Nobody interrupted. Some people avoided eye contact. Some questioned whether I belonged here. Ethan paused. One person did not. Emily wished the floor would open beneath her. Emily Carter treated me exactly the same way she would have treated any guest who walked through those doors. Ethan looked directly at her. She offered me a seat when others hesitated. She offered kindness when it was inconvenient. Most importantly, she treated me with dignity when she believed I had nothing to offer in return. The room remained silent. Across the restaurant, several employees lowered their eyes. They remembered the previous evening. Ethan slowly reached into his jacket pocket and removed the folded receipt from the night before. I also discovered something else. He unfolded the paper carefully. A note. Emily immediately recognized it. Her heart sank. Sometimes people need kindness more than they need a bill. Ethan read the words aloud. Then he looked up. "That sentence tells me more about our company values than any mission statement hanging on a wall." The regional executives nodded quietly. One of them even smiled. Ethan continued. "We spend millions of dollars every year improving menus, marketing campaigns, and customer experiences." His gaze moved across the room. "Yet the most important thing we offer cannot be purchased. It is how we make people feel." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. "Yesterday, Emily reminded me why I started this company in the first place." Ethan turned toward the executive team. Effective immediately, Emily Carter will begin training as a guest experience coordinator for this region. Audible surprise rippled through the restaurant. Emily blinked, certain she had misheard him. The position includes a salary increase, leadership development, and direct involvement in staff training programs. Ethan smiled slightly. Because kindness is a skill worth teaching. Emily could barely breathe. The promotion was unexpected, overwhelming. Yet what affected her most was not the opportunity. It was the reason behind it. Ethan then looked toward the floor manager. His expression remained professional, calm. As for leadership, the room became even quieter. Leadership is not measured by protecting appearances. It is measured by protecting values. The message was clear. No shouting, no humiliation, no drama, just truth. The floor manager lowered his eyes. For the first time, he seemed to understand. Ethan glanced back toward Emily. "You never knew who I was." Emily finally found her voice. "No, sir." A faint smile appeared on Ethan's face. "That is exactly why this matters." And in that moment, every person in the room realized the lesson had never been about a disguised billionaire. It had always been about character. 3 months later, the restaurant felt different. Not because the furniture had changed. Not because the menu was new. The difference lived in smaller things. Employees greeted guests more warmly. Managers spent more time on the dining floor than in their offices. New training sessions focused less on appearances and more on empathy. The transformation was gradual, almost invisible at first. Yet everyone could feel it. Emily certainly could. Her new role had taken her across multiple locations throughout the city. She met servers, hosts, managers, and kitchen staff. She listened to their challenges, shared what she had learned. Most importantly, she reminded them that hospitality was never about impressing people. It was about seeing them. One afternoon, she found herself standing inside a newly renovated restaurant reviewing customer feedback reports. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "You still read every comment personally." Emily looked up and smiled. Ethan stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. Gone was the disguise. Gone was the worn coat. Yet somehow he seemed more approachable than the man who had first walked through those doors months earlier. "Someone has to," Emily replied. Ethan handed her a cup. "You know, most executives delegate this sort of thing." Emily accepted the coffee. Maybe that is why they miss important details. Ethan laughed quietly. It was a sound she heard more often now. They walked toward the front windows overlooking the busy Manhattan street below. For a moment, neither spoke. People hurried past carrying briefcases, shopping bags, and umbrellas. Lives intersecting for only seconds before moving on. "I visited another location yesterday," Ethan said. A server pulled up a chair for an elderly customer who looked lonely. Emily smiled. "That is nice." The interesting part is what she said afterward. Ethan glanced at her. She told the customer that nobody should have to eat alone if they do not want to. Emily stared out the window. Her reflection blended with the city beyond the glass. "That sounds familiar." "It does." Ethan took a sip of coffee. Funny how one act of kindness can travel farther than any advertising campaign. Silence settled comfortably between them. Not the awkward silence of strangers. The peaceful silence of people who understood something important. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "You know, that night I thought I was testing my company." Emily looked at him. "And?" Ethan smiled. "It turns out I was the one being reminded of what mattered." Down below, a customer entered the restaurant. A hostess greeted him with a genuine smile. Simple, ordinary, easy to overlook. Yet Ethan watched it happen with quiet appreciation. Because he understood something now. Success was not measured only by numbers on a balance sheet. It was measured by moments like that. Small moments. Human moments. The kind that never appeared in annual reports but stayed with people forever. And as sunlight poured across the city skyline, Ethan realized the most valuable thing Emily had given him was never the seat by the window, the free coffee, or the handwritten note. It was a lesson, a quiet reminder that every person carries a story invisible to everyone else. And sometimes the greatest thing we can offer another human being is not money, status, or influence. Sometimes it is simply a chair, a conversation, and the feeling that they are not alone.